The storm came crawling over the plains like a wounded animal. Thunder grumbled in the distance, slow and heavy, shaking the horizon as if the sky itself were tired of holding its own weight. The wind tore across the open range, scattering dust and tumbleweed like lost souls. It was near dusk, that strange, haunted hour, when light and dark argue over the land, and the only man riding through it was Eli Ward. Eli rode, hunched against the cold, hat pulled low, slicker flapping behind him like a torn flag. He hadn't spoken to another human being in almost a year. Didn't have reason to. The cattle were gone. The wife was buried, and the land he worked had turned to clay and regret. He rode now only to check fence lines that no longer mattered, a ghost keeping watch over bones. The first flash of lightning showed the outline of something wrong ahead. A dark figure hung from a tree just off the wagon road, its shape jerking softly in the wind. For a moment, Eli thought the storm was playing tricks. A broken sign, a tattered coat caught on a branch, but as he drew closer, his horse snorted and froze. He saw the truth. It was a body, a woman. Eli's pulse kicked up under his coat. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into the rain-soaked mud. The rope creaked with each sway of her weight, that awful, slow rhythm that sounds too much like breath. Her dress was white once, maybe, now blackened by dirt and blood. Her bare feet were pale as bone. A brand new noose, thick, clean hemp, cut into her throat like a scar carved by justice that didn't belong to the law. Eli pulled off his hat and whispered, "Lord have mercy." The storm cracked overhead, blinding light splitting the valley. In that instant, he saw her face, young, maybe 20, lashes matted with rain, lips parted slightly as if caught mid. Her hair clung to her cheeks in wet ropes. She didn't look like a sinner. She looked like someone the world had already forgotten. He stepped closer. That's when it happened. Her hand moved, just a twitch at first, two fingers curling as if reaching for something in a dream. Eli stopped breathing. He thought he'd imagined it, but then her chest lifted, barely, like the wind had tried to whisper life back into her. Eli's voice broke through the storm. No, that can't be." He stumbled forward, grabbed his knife, and cut the rope in one swift motion. The woman's body fell limp into his arms. She was cold as riverstone, heavy and still, until a sound came out of her. A breath, a long, rattling gasp that made the hair on his arms rise. She was alive. Her eyes snapped open, wild, gray, full of panic. She tried to scream, but the sound came out as a broken rasp. Eli staggered backward, nearly dropping her, but his grip tightened on instinct. "Easy now," he whispered. "Easy, girl. You're safe, safe." The word felt like a lie in that storm. The rope still swung above them, empty now, the loop twisting lazily like it was searching for a new neck. His horse whined and backed away. The rain came down harder, drumming against the girl's face, washing streaks of mud from her cheeks. Eli looked around. No torches, no riders, no sign of who had done this. Only the tree, the storm, and the girl who refused to die. He shifted her weight into his arms and started to ward home. The path back to the cabin cut through a hollow creek bed, slick, dark, and choked with fog. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, each flash painting her features like an unfinished portrait. The rope burns around her throat were raw, swollen. He could see the imprint of the knot. Whoever tied that noose meant for her to swing long and slow. By the time they reached the ridge, the girl stirred again. Her voice came in fragments, weak as candlelight. Don't let them see me." Eli's jaw tightened. "Ain't nobody gonna see you, ma'am." Her eyes fluttered shut. The rain chased them the whole way, a relentless, cold thing that washed the blood from her dress, but not from his mind. When the cabin finally appeared through the fog, Eli kicked the door open with his boot. The hinges screamed like they hadn't been used in years. He laid her on the bed near the hearth, covered her with an old wool blanket, and stood there for a long while, staring at her face by lantern light. Every so often, her chest rose and fell, shallow, unsteady, alive. Outside, the storm broke apart. The wind quieted. The hanging tree stood alone against the skyline, its branch bending under the empty rope, swinging softly in the dying rain. Eli watched it from the doorway and muttered to himself, voice low and uncertain. Whatever brought her back, it wasn't mercy. He closed the door. The storm hadn't ended. It had only grown quieter, like a predator circling in the dark. Rain whispered on the roof, slow and deliberate, each drop sounding like a footstep above. Eli sat by the fire, elbows on his knees, watching the flames dance over the wood. The girl lay on his cot beneath a wool blanket, breathing slow but uneven. The rise and fall of her chest, just enough to prove she was still here. Her skin had color again, faint, ghostly, but alive. Around her neck, the rope burns stood out in ugly purple ridges. Eli had cleaned them as best he could, using water boiled from his tin kettle and rags that smelled faintly of whiskey. He didn't ask her name. Not yet. Folks that close to death didn't need questions, just quiet. But quiet never lasted long in Eli's cabin. The place creaked like old bones. The rafters whined in the wind, and the boards beneath the hearth shifted with every gust. Eli's hound, a gray mutt named Scout, lay near the door but hadn't stopped growling since they came in. The dog's eyes never left the girl, ears pinned back, teeth barely visible. Eli finally spoke. His voice was deep, the kind that carried regret in every syllable. She ain't your enemy, boy, he said, tossing another log into the fire. She's just half dead. Scout didn't move. He just kept growling low, chest rumbling like distant thunder. Eli sighed, pulled his chair back, and took a sip of coffee gone cold. His eyes went to the window. Beyond the glass, the plains were swallowed by fog, not the kind that drifts, but the kind that stays, thick and unnatural. He could barely make out the corral fence. For all he knew, there could be riders out there right now. Watching, he didn't like that thought. By dawn, the storm had thinned to drizzle. Eli dozed in the chair, knife still in his hand, when the sound of breathing changed behind him. The girl was awake. He turned slow, not wanting to startle her. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling beams, then flicked to him, sharp, frightened, confused. Where am I? She rasped. Her voice was sandpaper, barely human, after what the news had done. My cabin, Eli answered. You were hanging from a tree last night. She blinked, trying to remember. Her hand went to her throat. The bruises made her flinch. You cut me down. I did. What? Eli didn't answer right away. He looked into the fire. Didn't seem right, leaving somebody breathing under a noose. The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she sat up slowly, wincing. They'll come for me. Who's they? She didn't say, just looked toward the window, like she expected to see torches coming through the fog. Eli studied her in silence. He'd seen that kind of fear before, the kind that lived deep in the bones. Folks who'd run from hangings didn't forget the rope. He reached for his hat and stood. I'll check the horses. You rest. But when he opened the cabin door, his stomach turned cold. Fresh hoofprints in the mud, not his. Not from last night either. 3 sets, maybe 4, circling near the corral and leading toward the creek. Someone had been out there while he slept. He crouched low, touching the prints. The edges were wet but not filled with rain. Less than an hour old. Whoever they were, they'd been close. Watching. Eli came back inside, shut the door, and slid the iron bolt across. You said they'd come, he said. You were right. Her eyes darted up, terrified. Did they see me? Hard to say. She clutched the blanket tighter, shoulders trembling. You don't understand. They think I'm dead. If they know I'm not, he cut her off gently. Then we best keep it that way. He drew the curtain over the window and poured water from the kettle. You got a name? Clara. He nodded. All right, Clara. You eat something, get your strength back. Whatever happened out there, we'll sort it. Clara shook her head. You can't help me. You shouldn't have cut me down. Eli met her gaze, and for a moment, neither spoke. The wind moaned outside, dragging across the walls like a whisper. He said quietly, ain't the first mistake I've made that tried to kill me later. The fire popped, casting orange light across their faces, a lonely man and a hanged girl, bound by something neither could name. Outside, the hoofprints began to fade under the drizzle, but their meaning stayed carved deep in Eli's gut. He knew trouble when he smelled it. It had a way of finding his door, no matter how far he'd tried to ride from it. As the night crawled back in and the fog thickened around the cabin, one truth lingered in his mind like the echo of thunder. Whatever Clara had escaped from, it wasn't finished with her yet. Whatever brought her back, it wasn't mercy. He closed the door. By the second day, the storm had passed, but the world outside the cabin still felt heavy, like the land itself was holding its breath. The air smelled of wet pine and iron. Mist hung over the hills like an unburied ghost. Eli stood outside, sharpening his knife, eyes scanning the ridgeline for any sign of riders. None came. Not yet. Inside, Clara had managed to stand. She moved slow, her hand often brushing against the wall for balance. Eli had laid out clean clothes, a faded shirt and trousers from an old trunk, and she wore them awkwardly. Sleeves rolled, cuffs dragging. She caught him watching once and said softly, "They'll think I'm your son." He grunted. Wouldn't be the worst thing folks thought round here. When she tried to smile, the rope burns along her throat pulled tight. She winced. Instead, Eli came in, boots tracking mud, and set a kettle on the fire. You remember any of them? He asked the ones who did it. Her eyes flickered. Not fear now, but memory. The kind that cuts. I remember the sound first, she said. The crowd didn't cheer or cry. They just watched, like they were starving, and I was supper. She turned toward the window. The light caught the scars on her neck. They said I was cursed, that the mine went bad because of me. The Weston boys ran it, 5 of them, and their father meaner than all combined. I worked in the house, cooking, cleaning, sometimes worse. When the drink took hold, her voice shook. One night, the youngest got hurt in the tunnels. Rocks fell. They said it was witchcraft. Said I'd cursed their fortune. They dragged me out before dawn. Eli said nothing. He'd heard enough men use God's name to hide their sin. Clara's gaze dropped to the floor. They didn't wait for a preacher or a sheriff. Just tied me up, right there by that oak on the road. I remember the smell of whiskey and blood. I remember the sound of the rope creaking. Her voice fell to a whisper. Then nothing. Eli stirred the kettle, slow. And you woke up when I cut you down. She nodded, then looked at him hard. No, I woke up before you. Someone else cut the rope. I saw boots, a knife, but when I hit the ground, the world went black. When I opened my eyes again, it was you." Eli frowned. "You think one of them let you live?" Her hands trembled. "If they did, it wasn't mercy. Maybe they wanted to see if the devil would finish the job." He leaned back, chair creaking. The fire threw long shadows across the cabin walls. "Weston's run the claim south of here. Haven't seen M in near 2 years. But I heard stories, men disappearing, wagons robbed, a marshal shot on their land, whole families poisoned." Clara looked at him sharply. "You know them?" "I knew the old man once," Eli said. "Fought beside him in the war. He wasn't the kind that learned from peace." They sat in silence for a while. Outside, crows circled over the ridge, black flecks against the gray sky. Clara's fingers traced the scar on her neck. "You ever lose anyone, Eli?" He didn't answer for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was rough. "My wife and a boy. Took sick one winter when the fever came through. Buried M behind the barn. Never spoke to another soul since." "I'm sorry," he shook his head. "Don't be. Some things the earth just claims back." For the first time since she arrived, Clara smiled, not out of joy, but recognition. Two people carved hollow by the same knife. As the fire dimmed, Eli picked up a strange object from beside the door, a brass button, half buried in the mud the night before. It bore an engraved letter, W. He set it on the table, metal glinting in the lamplight. "You've seen this before?" he asked. Clara stared at it, face draining of color. "That's theirs," she whispered. "The Weston crest." Eli's jaw clenched. "Then they already know you're not dead." The room went quiet again, too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hush. Scout, the hound, lifted his head and growled low, staring toward the window. Eli followed his gaze. Beyond the frosted glass, something moved, just a shadow slipping past the tree line. Too tall for an animal, too still for wind. Eli rose slow, grabbed his rifle, and blew out the lamp. Clara whispered, "What do you see?" He answered without turning, "Ghosts don't leave tracks." And outside, in the mud beneath the pale moon, a fresh set of bootprints glistened, leading straight toward the cabin. Morning came gray and silent, like the world had forgotten to wake up. The storm had left a ghostly fog across the valley, thick enough to swallow a horsehole. The air smelled of wet wood and gun oil. Eli stood by the window, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the tree line for movement. He hadn't slept. Not really. Every crack of the cabin walls, every distant owl cry felt like a warning. Clara sat by the fire wrapped in her blanket, staring into the flames like they might offer answers. She hadn't said a word since he'd shown her the Weston crest. Eli loaded a round into his Winchester and muttered, "Fog's too still. That ain't nature." Clara looked up. "They're here." He didn't ask how she knew. He could feel it too, that creeping stillness right before trouble takes form. Scout barked once, sharp and sudden, and the sound carried out into the mist like a signal. Then came the reply. The soft crunch of hooves. Eli blew out the lantern. The fire was now their only light, flickering across rough-hewn walls and tense faces. Outside, the fog rippled. He saw the faint shapes of horses, 3 of them, emerging slow, deliberate, like shadows on parade. A man's voice called from beyond the haze. "Howdy. The cabin? We're looking for someone. Maybe you seen her." Eli didn't move. He set the rifle against his shoulder, barrel aimed at the door. "Ain't talkin' visitors." The voice chuckled. "That's so. Well, we're just passing through. Heard tell a witch got loose near these parts. Woman, pretty thing. Rope burn round her neck. If you've seen her, it'd be neighborly to tell." Clara's hand gripped Eli's arm, trembling. He could feel her pulse through his sleeve, fast as a trapped bird's. Eli called back, "Ain't seen no one but ghosts in this fog. You boys might want to ride on." The voice went quiet for a beat, then boots hit mud. Someone dismounted. The horses shifted, snorting. The crunch of steps drew closer, slow, heavy. The kind of walk that didn't fear a bullet. Scout growled from under the table. Eli whispered, "Stay down." The door rattled once, a polite knock that somehow sounded like a threat. "Name's Hank Weston," the voice said now, lower, closer. "My brothers and I lost a piece of property last night. We aimed to find it." Eli felt his jaw tighten. He knew that name. Hank had been a boy during the war, cruel even then. The kind that smiled when men screamed. "You got no business here," Eli said. Hank laughed softly. "Oh, I reckon I do. Words travelin' fast. That a witch was seen breathin' again after hunging. Ain't natural, is it? Sheriff says to burn what the rope couldn't kill." Eli stepped toward the door, keeping the rifle ready. "You tell your sheriff the Westons don't speak for God. You ride on, or I start my own sermon." For a long moment, nothing. Just the fog pressing against the windows, then, boots receding, hooves shifting, the sound of someone spitting. "See you soon, preacher," Hank called. "Fogla lift, and we'll come with daylight." Then they were gone. Eli waited a full minute before lowering the gun. His breath came slow, but heavy, like he'd been holding it for an hour. Clara still sat frozen, her knuckles white around the edge of the blanket. "They'll come back," she whispered. "I know. They won't stop." He nodded. "Then neither will I." He crossed to the barn once the fog began to thin, every sense alive. The horses were spooked, ears twitching, eyes rolling. He found a symbol scorched into the barn door, a crude W drawn in black ash. Under it, a rope nailed through the wood, the loop dangling like a promise. Eli tore it down, jaw locked, and looked back toward the cabin. Smoke still rose faint from the chimney. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest sound of a man's laughter across the valley. Distant, mocking, it faded into the hills, leaving only silence and the smell of burnt hemp. Inside, Clara stared at the window, whispering words he didn't understand. Something old, something fearful. Eli didn't interrupt. He just set the rifle by the door and began counting the bullets he had left. Not enough, never was. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, grim. They'll write in numbers next time. We'll be ready. The fire snapped. Outside, the fog rolled back into the trees, leaving a single truth written in the mud beneath that hanging oak. The hanging hadn't ended. It had only changed hands. Eli Ward wasn't a praying man, but that morning, as he scrubbed the blood-marked door clean and burned the noose in the fire, he muttered something halfway between a curse and a prayer. The cabin smelled of smoke and gun oil. It was the smell of a man preparing for company. He didn't invite and didn't plan to entertain twice. The Westons would come, not with talk this time, but with fire. And when they did, the cabin had to stand like a tombstone that refused to fall. He started with the windows. Thick planks ripped from an old trough became shutters, nailed tight with iron spikes. Every hammer strike echoed across the valley, a warning the fog carried for miles. Then the door bolted, reinforced, crossbarred with timber thick as a man's leg. Inside, Clara moved quietly, helping however she could. Her hands trembled, but her jaw stayed set. She tore strips from a canvas sack, binding bullets one by one, filling the gaps in the floor with gravel and pitch. The fire cast her shadow long across the wall. The same girl who'd swung from a tree, now steady and defiant beneath the roof of the man who saved her. At one point, Eli stopped to watch her. She caught his look and frowned. You think I'm gonna break? Eli spat a nail out of his mouth, hammer in hand. No, I think you already did, and came back meaner. She almost smiled, though her eyes betrayed the fear still buried deep. You ever think maybe God's laughing at us right now? Eli set the hammer down. If he is, he'll have a hard time doing it over the noise I plan to make. By mid-afternoon, the sky turned a dirty bronze. Storm clouds were building again, the kind that never arrived without bringing death along for the ride. Eli used the light while he could. He pulled the tarp off a chest under his bed and lifted out an old Spencer rifle wrapped in oilcloth. The weapon had been with him since the war, its stock worn, its barrel kissed by rust. He cleaned it with the same care men give to scripture. Clara watched from the hearth. You fought before. Once, he said. Didn't like it much. Why keep the rifle? Then, because the world didn't stop fightin' just 'cause I did. She nodded. My father had a saying. Some folks plant seeds, others plant graves. Guess we're both digging the same kind of hole now. Eli looked up, meeting her eyes. Difference is, I aim for mine to stay filled. The two worked without more talk. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick, charged, the kind that builds between two souls who know what's coming. Scout paced near the door, restless. The air outside had changed to heavy, electric quiet that always came before riders. When the sun finally dipped, they stopped to eat. Salt pork and cold beans, washed down with whiskey that burned like judgment. Clara coughed at the taste. Eli handed her a tin cup of water. Whiskey's for remembering, water's for fightin'. She smirked weakly. And what you doing? He took the bottle back. Both. As darkness spread, they lit only a single lamp. Eli opened a small wooden box on the table. Inside were 6 bullets he'd carved tiny crosses into with his knife. These ain't blessed, he said, half to himself, but they'll do. Clara ran her thumb over one of them. You really think they'll come? Eli's reply was steady. I think they're already written. That night, the wind shifted east. Coyotes howled from the ridge. The fog returned thinner this time, but alive, swirling through the low grass. The cabin walls groaned with every gust. Clara sat near the fire, staring into the embers. Do you ever kill a man? She asked softly. Eli didn't look up from cleaning the rifle. Too many, none that didn't earn it. She hesitated. And if I pull that trigger tomorrow, then you do what you gotta. You don't freeze. You don't think. You breathe and pull. The rest'll come after. Clara nodded, eyes glistening. You think anyone'll remember us? Eli's face softened for the first time all night. If we do it right, they'll remember what we did. Outside, thunder murmured again in the far distance. It was rolling in slow, certain, like an approaching drumbeat. Eli rose, set his hat on the table, and doused the lamp. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow's gonna ask more from us than we got left to give. As the fire dimmed to coals, Clara lay down wrapped in the blanket. The old rancher stayed awake by the window, rifle across his knees, eyes on the horizon. The fog glowed faintly in the moonlight, the last remnants of the storm curling around the hanging tree at the edge of the valley. Somewhere out there, the Weston brothers were saddling up, bringing with them the kind of justice the frontier loved best, cruel, loud, and final. Eli tightened his grip on the rifle. If they wanted a hanging, he'd give them one, but this time, the rope would be in his hands. Dawn came blood-red, the kind of dawn that meant something was about to die. Eli felt it before he saw it, that crawling tension in the wind. The way the birds vanished, the way even Scout went quiet. He'd lived through enough gunfights to know. When the air was about to turn violent, he stood at the window with his rifle ready, watching the horizon as it bled light through the fog. Clara sat near the table, hands shaking as she loaded cartridges into the revolver he'd given her. The bruises around her throat were darker today, stark against her pale skin, a reminder that the West never forgot its cruelty. "They're cumin," Eli said. Clara didn't ask how he knew. The land had gone still again, and somewhere beyond the tree line, a crow screamed. That was all the warning they got. A single gunshot cracked through the morning air. Then came the echo. Another, closer. And then, like the opening notes of a song, hell itself might hum. 6 riders appeared through the mist. The Westons, torches in hand, guns at their hips, faces carved from hate and whiskey. Hank Weston rode in front, his coat flapping open, a rope tied to his saddle horn, the same rope Eli had cut from that oak tree. "Eli Ward," he called out. "You're shelterin', the devil's whore." Eli's voice came calm, steady, deadly. "You ride any closer, you'll meet the same Lord she did, and he won't take kindly to company." The riders spread out, forming a half-circle around the cabin. The torchlight flickered against their faces, orange and cruel. Hank spit into the dirt. "You think you can stop 6 of us?" Eli smirked. "No, but I can slow you down enough to make the next batch nervous." He didn't wait for a reply. The first shot cracked before Hank could raise his gun. The bullet tore through the air, caught one of the brothers square in the chest, and sent him tumbling backward off his horse. Chaos followed. The world exploded into thunder and smoke. Guns roared. Horses screamed. Wood splintered as bullets punched through the cabin walls. Clara dove behind the table, firing back in short, desperate bursts. Eli moved like a machine. Calm, deliberate, the rhythm of survival guiding every shot. 2 men tried to rush the door. Eli dropped the first with a head, then swung the rifle toward. The second click, empty. He cursed under his breath and drew his revolver. Just as the door shattered under the man's weight, the fight turned personal. Wood splinters flew as Eli and the intruder crashed into the wall. The man's breath smelled like rot and liquor. "Where's the witch?" he hissed. Eli drove his knife into the man's gut, twisted, and shoved him off. "She ain't the witch," he growled. "You are." Clara screamed behind him. Another Weston had made it through the window. She fired, missed, and the man lunged. His hand grabbed her by the throat, forcing her toward the same rope he'd dragged in behind him. The noose brushed her skin. "Let's finish what we started," he snarled. Eli turned, rage flaring like fire through old scars. He grabbed the burning torch from the wall and hurled it at the man. The flame caught his coat, spreading fast. The Weston stumbled backward, screaming as he fell into the burning debris. The rope slipped from his hand, landing at Clara's feet. She stared down at it, that cursed circle of hemp, and something inside her changed. No fear now, only fury. She picked up the rope, looped it around her hand, and whispered, "Your turn." The last Weston through the door barely had time to react. She swung the rope around his neck and pulled with all her strength. Eli watched, silent, as the man's boots scraped across the floor, then went still. Outside, the others were retreating to left. Now, Hank among them. He fired wildly into the cabin, shouting curses that dissolved into the wind. Eli stepped outside, smoke curling around him like war paint. The last fight was silent. 2 men, 1 gun each. The fog thickened again, swallowing the world until only their shadows were visible. Hank fired first. Missed. Eli didn't. The shot echoed off the ridge, scattering the crows that had been waiting for the ending. Hank fell, blood seeping into the wet earth. Eli approached slow, boots crunching in the mud. Hank looked up, coughing. "You think this ends it?" Eli knelt beside him, eyes hard. "It ends you. That's enough." He stood, holstered his gun, and turned back toward the cabin. The roof was smoking, the door half hanging from its hinges. Clara stood in the threshold, trembling but alive. The rope burned in the fire beside her. One final hiss, one last breath, and it was gone. Eli took his hat off, stared at the sunrise breaking through the clouds. "Looks like the Hangin came full circle," he said quietly. Clara's voice was soft but steady. "Then maybe it's time we cut the line." The wind shifted, carrying away the last of the gunsmoke. The valley went quiet again, the kind of quiet that only comes after death has taken its share. Eli holstered his revolver, eyes on the horizon. "Ain't no angels in this country," he said, "but sometimes there's justice." The rain started slow, a whisper against the scorched roof, then gathered strength, falling heavy, cleansing, relentless. It hissed over the smoldering embers of the cabin, steaming off the blood-soaked dirt, washing away footprints and ash alike. Eli stood outside, coat heavy with water, the brim of his hat dripping onto the mud. Around him lay the dead Westons scattered across the yard like broken statues. The air reeked of gunpowder, burned wood, and justice long overdue. Clara came to stand beside him, blanket around her shoulders. Her hair clung to her face, and rain traced the scars on her neck like silver veins. She didn't speak for a long while. The two of them just watched the water rise around their boots. The land drinking deep. Funny, she said at last, voice quiet. I used to pray for rain, back at the mines. Thought maybe it could wash that place clean. Didn't realize it'd take this much blood to do it. Eli's eyes followed the horizon. Gray, endless, new. Out here, clean, don't come cheap. They turned toward the cabin, or what was left of it. Smoke still curled from the roof where the torch had caught. The fire had eaten half the wall, leaving the other half black and cracked. But the foundation held. Somehow, it always did. Inside, everything was soaked. The floor glistened with rainwater leaking through the roof, puddling around the empty rifle shells. Clara knelt by the hearth, feeding the last of the rope into the flames. The wet hemp sizzled and spat as it burned, releasing a bitter smoke that curled like a spirit leaving the world. She whispered something, not a prayer, not a curse, just a final farewell to the thing that nearly took her life. When she stood, she looked lighter. Eli leaned against the doorway, watching her. You ain't got to stay here, he said. Soon as the ground dries, I'll get you to town. Sheriff'll want words, maybe protection. Clara shook her head. The sheriff's in the Weston's pocket. If he wanted to protect me, he'd have done it before they hung me. Eli sighed. Then where will you go? She looked out the window, where the rain ran down the glass like tears. Maybe north. Start new. Change my name. Focusal. Forget the girl who swung. Eli gave a faint smile. People forget the livin' faster than the dead. That's the curse of it. Clara stepped closer, eyes meeting his. Then maybe you could remember me. He didn't answer, but the silence between them said enough. Outside, the rain began to ease. The fog that had haunted the valley for days was finally breaking, lifting off the hills like a curtain after a long bloody play. Beyond the oak tree, the same one she'd been hanged from, the soil was dark and wet. Ready. Eli took up a shovel from the barn, and together they buried the Westons beneath that tree. No prayers, no markers, just earth, rain, and the sound of shovels cutting through mud. When it was done, Clara placed one small stone atop the mound. For the ones they buried before me, she said, and the ones who won't swing no more. Eli's throat tightened, but he kept his voice steady. Ain't much peace out here, he said, but sometimes, you can build something close enough to pass for it. They stood there until the rain faded into a drizzle, until the clouds parted enough to show a faint sunrise bleeding gold over the hills. The light caught the water on the tree branches, making them shimmer like glass. Eli looked up. Never thought I'd see the day this land looked clean again. Clara smiled, faint but real. Maybe it ain't clean, she said. Maybe it's just starting over. Eli turned to her, tipping his hat. That's all any of us can do. As they walked back toward the cabin, Scout trotted behind, tail wagging for the first time in days. The birds had returned to the trees, singing low, uncertain songs. Life, creeping back and slow, at the cabin door. Eli paused and looked once more at the grave beneath the oak. Then at the rope's last ashes, still glowing faint in the hearth. He said quietly, almost to himself, nobody hangs alone anymore. The rain stopped. The wind shifted, and somewhere far off, thunder rolled one final time, not in anger, but in closure. The rain faded by noon, leaving the air clean and sharp, heavy with the scent of wet cedar and gun smoke. The valley lay quiet again, the kind of quiet that follows judgment. Somewhere beyond the hills, the west rode on, as if nothing had happened. But here, something had shifted. Eli Ward stood on the porch, his rifle leaning beside him, watching the clouds drift apart. Behind him, the cabin walls still carried the scars of the siege, bullet holes, burn marks, the dark stains of survival. But there was warmth again inside. A fire rebuilt from what had almost turned to ash. Clara moved through the cabin, slow but steady, her voice soft as she hummed a tune no one else would remember. She wasn't the ghost they'd tried to make her. She was proof that even in a land that fed on death, the living could still defy it. Eli's voice carried over the wind, low and sure, like the kind of voice that ends a story because it's earned the right to. In this country, justice don't come from the courts, he said. It comes from the hands that still believe in mercy, even when mercy's got blood on it. Out here, every grave and every sunrise tells the same truth. We don't survive alone. He looked once more at the sunrise breaking across the range. The light touched the cabin, the oak tree, and the two souls standing in between, not bound by rope, but by what they'd lived through together. Then his voice softened to a final, haunting invitation. If this story found its way to your heart, saddle up with us for the next one. Out here, justice rides again. Don't just watch the West. Remember it. Fade to rain, fade to light, fade to dust.